There is no reason to let you out. He has basically offered everything he has. $50 million bail proposal is something he put up. I turn my head for a second, you get effed up, you drag me down the hall by my hair, I have bleeding cuts. You hit me in the head 2 times. And so his updated proposal doesn't alleviate the risk, and so you cannot let him out. Diddy really wants to get out of custody. He has requested a 3rd release hearing, and government prosecutors are fighting back against that, saying there is no reason to let you out. Demanding the judge keeps him in. The judge has already held him in twice. Diddy is trying a 3rd time, and we'll see what happens, but the hearing is going to be coming up next week, and he has basically offered everything he has. $50 million bail proposal is something he put up. Prosecutors have listened to jail calls and other evidence, and they're arguing you cannot let him out at all. And so this is what the government said in response. They'll give us some details on what Diddy is asking for and why it should be denied. But you can see it's a 30-pager. We'll hit the highlights. Now, before we keep going, let's pause and talk about our health. We've got more and more medical breakthroughs happening all over the place. So the question is, why are millions of Americans more unhealthy and overweight than they've ever been before? Good question. Well, according to U.S. board-certified physician and expert nutritionist, her name is Dr. Amy Lee, one of the main reasons, 3 harmful foods they tell us are healthy. They're not. Wait until you hear this. These foods cause weight gain, clog your digestive tract, deplete your energy, wreck your beautiful skin. They're banned in other countries, but they're allowed here in the United States. What are they? Well, Dr. Amy Lee explains that. She's made this video for us that shows us which foods are wreaking havoc on Americans. Good news is you can reverse this. Just got to know what foods they are and what not to eat. And then you can experience smooth digestion, vibrant energy, and a bunch of other amazing things. And so if you want to see what these 3 fake foods are, go to 3harmfulfoods.com. You'll see a website like this with Dr. Amy Lee, and she'll explain exactly what's going on. So check it out, 3harmfulfoods.com/RG. She's done extensive studies, so we're never duped by these foods again. Check it out, 3harmfulfoods.com/RG, or click the link in the description below and avoid those foods. This is their response saying you have to keep Diddy in, okay? Cannot let him out. He's a danger to others. He's a flight risk. He's already obstructing justice, and it's a problem. So keep him in. Now, we've had criticisms about these government charges because they're pretty thin as they stand right now. We're expecting another set of charges to come down the pike at some point. But the basis of it was basically a RICO charge, and they put a prostitute, they allege, on an airplane, an adult prostitute on an airplane, and flew them someplace. So that's human trafficking across state lines. Now, the people who are on those planes, their defense is, we're just models. Yeah, we got paid to model, and when we landed there, if we wanted to freak off all over the place, we're allowed to do that as consenting adults, but our payment was for the transportation and for looking good and all those things. Now, it's not a lifestyle I condone or am a part of, but that I imagine is not the crime of the century for this domain of people who are in that lifestyle, okay? I imagine that this is happening a lot, all over Washington, D.C., all over Congress even, all right? We saw similar situations with Elliot Spitzer and all those guys, okay? It's like an operation. So transporting an adult across state lines who is a consenting adult who says, I was a model at the time, leads me, and when they have all of this other stuff, okay, evidence of freak-offs and assaults and drugs and R's and all sorts of things, it feels a little off, okay? What else is out there? Now, there will be more charges coming. We're fully expecting that, so it's probably just early, but we're still battling from that perspective. Diddy is sitting here. He's like, what the heck have I been charged with? For hiring a model and flying her on an airplane, or him on an airplane, or whomever? And is demanding a release, and the judge is also looking at that, right? And the reason they charged him with these charges is because they are non-bondable, so he cannot get out just based on the nature of the charge. So they didn't charge him with assaults or R's or other things that maybe would be bondable. They're really fighting to keep him in. It's very interesting. So the government now is opposing letting him out, and they say the defendant and his motion should be denied. 2 judges have already concluded that he poses a serious risk of danger of obstruction obstruction, danger and obstruction. In seeking a new hearing, Diddy rehashes the same arguments that the other judges have already rejected. There is no new evidence. There's nothing new. In fact, the only true new relevant evidence from Diddy is that he's continued to engage in a relentless course of obstruction, as detailed below, while attempting to evade law enforcement monitoring by, let's see what happens in the jails. He has, among other things, orchestrated social media campaigns that are, in his own words, aimed at tainting the jury pool, which is interesting. So they're going to try to gag him too. Made efforts to publicly leak materials that he thinks are helpful to his case, and he's contacted witnesses through third parties. Now, he's already tried to get out twice. I think we talked about the first one here. For these reasons, the court should deny a new bail hearing. His motion ignores significant evidence presented by the government that shows Diddy is a violent serial abuser who uses his vast wealth and position in the entertainment industry to conceal this conduct. And so in light of these dangers and the safety of the community, we need to make sure he cannot be let go. No set of conditions can meet the task of releasing him to assure we're all safe and he's not going to freak off on us or something. The defendant and his request for temporary relief should be rejected. His confinement in Brooklyn affords him more than adequate opportunity to prepare for trial, and he is already too much of a danger to the community and a threat to the integrity of these proceedings. And so here we go. Just a reminder on the charges. Racketeering, right? This is the conspiracy charge, RICO, which is very broad. And then you see it's trafficking and interstate transportation, right? Trafficking and interstate transportation. So that's like one model who was transported on an airplane across state lines. And that model might even say, I was a model. I wasn't even there and I wanted to freak off once I got there. So pretty thin. Okay. If they're telling us all this other stuff is true, like he had people drugged up all over the place and they were getting AR'd for days on end and all sorts of stuff, like that's what this is all about. Obviously there's more. Now, as alleged in count one, he participated in a racketeering conspiracy since at least 2008. And this is the other part too. The statute of limitations on the other crimes would have expired from 2008. Like all the assaults and some of the other items, right? Other crimes, maybe domestic violence and depending on the states. Like let's say you have a 10-year statute of limitations, right? Those crimes expire in 2018. They're old. But when they make it a RICO charge, so when they bootstrap a RICO on here, this feels weird to be even, be kind of defending Diddy in this position, but it's going, wait a minute. You used a racketeering conspiracy charge to make it so that the most recent overt act will create an envelope over which you can go all the way back to 2008. These charges would have otherwise expired, but now they can envelop them. They can wrap them into racketeering wrapping them into a charge by just calling it racketeering. Okay, it's the same thing Fannie did. It's like, except Fannie wasn't trying to beat around a statute of limitations. This might be worse than what Fannie did. And I'm not excusing Diddy. Diddy's entire brand was pimps and hoes, okay? But it's like the DOJ, this is what you got of all of this, okay? Specifically as charged in the indictment, the defendant, often assisted by other members and associates, engaged in trafficking and acts of violence, right? Kidnapping, arson, physical violence, and other crimes. Okay, well, if those happened in 2008, if there was kidnapping in 2008, probably a statute of limitations in there, and that's expired, okay? That's gone if it's old. If it's new, then not. Arson, same thing too, right? Let's say 5 years, 7-year statute of limitations. Physical violence, assaults, those are short statute of limitations. Other crimes, what other crimes? They would not be able to charge him with any of those, is my guess, unless they called it a RICO conspiracy. Now, as the indictment alleges, from at least 2008 to 2024, he used force, threats of force, coercion, to cause women to engage in sexual activity, which included sex acts with male commercial sex workers that he decided as freak-offs. These are all the overt acts that are nestled within the RICO case. They're not actual sub-charges. The charges are transporting a person. Freak-offs, which sometimes lasted days, go wild, were elaborate performances where he enjoyed himself and recorded them. Oh, gosh. Now, he ensured that female victims participated through coercion and violence, which may have expired, right? Was presumably never reported or anything. Supplied them with substances, subjecting them to emotional and verbal abuse, controlling their careers, livelihoods, and housing. And in connection with this conduct, count 2 charges him. So, right, those are acts, but he hasn't been charged with these things per se. They're overt acts within the RICO case to show that there's an ongoing conspiracy. So in connection with this conduct, then the actual charge charges. Count 2 charges the defendant with sex trafficking victim 1 by force, fraud, or coercion. So who's victim 1? And count 3 charges the defendant with causing the interstate transportation of others for the purpose of engaging in prostitution. So one person was maneuvered for sex and probably on an airplane. He was arrested September 16th and was held in custody. After a hearing, they said, nope, we're not going to let you go. He emphasized the serious nature of the charges, and these are non-bondable, right? You hit them with these charges, they're not going to let you out. Oh, you're a sex trafficker. We can't let you out. Yeah, but she was a model from a company or something, right? We're not the border czar Kamala Harris, who lost 300,000 kids at the border. Following the defendant's arraignment on the indictment, the government moved to hold him. The defendant appealed the decision. After lengthy argument, the judge again denied it. He says, this is the government speaking, he has to have some sort of a change. A hearing may be reopened if it's new and material information, but he hasn't presented any new and material information. His opportunity now for this is saying that he's saying there is new information because he had a relationship with victim 1. They were in a relationship, and his communications with various witnesses, he says, has a basis to reopen the bail hearing. But these allegedly new facts are the very same arguments he made before, dressed up with recently produced discovery. Those facts were already well known to the defendant, and because he relied upon them in his prior situation, he can't rely on those now. Here's what we're talking about. Now, he claims that communications between victim 1, which were recently produced in discovery, were new material. He claims that the text messages reveal a loving, at times toxic, long-term relationship between two adults who decided to mutually break up. Okay, so they were in some freaky relationship too. This claim is nothing new. Defense counsel made these exact points previously, even referring to the messages, noting, we looked through more text messages and emails than he cared to. They said in a prior motion, they said, this is a 10-year relationship. This sex trafficking is called a 10-year relationship. These two people were in love. That will be made abundantly clear by the way they speak to each other, by the way other witnesses described their time together, and by the circumstances on how they broke up. They were in love, but Mr. Combs wasn't always faithful. At the end of the day, there was mutual philandering, and victim number 1 ended up marrying the trainer that Diddy got for her, and they had 2 children, and so that was the end of the relationship. That's trafficking and human trafficking. His girlfriend got it. Now, furthermore, in presenting recently produced text messages, Diddy cherry picks to paint a misleading picture, they say, ignoring numerous other messages in the record, between them documenting physical abuse. Okay, that's fine. Should have charged him with assault back then when it happened, not RICO and sex trafficking. And threats to expose recording the freak-offs. Okay, that's threatening and intimidation or blackmail. You know what sick and disgusting stuff I was reminded of the other day? You're forcing me, or you were going to leak some freak-off stuff. I have a black guy and a fat lip. I turn my head for a second, you get effed up, you drag me down the hall by my hair, I have bleeding cuts. You hit me in the head 2 times. Okay, I'm not condoning that at all. Those are assault charges or aggravated assault. Hit him with a felony. Open wounds in the brain, in the head. That's a felony. Okay, get him for that. Moreover, despite attaching lengthy text messages, she says, I'm not a rag doll, I'm someone's child. Yeah, we know, and we don't condone that at all. But does that mean you were sexually trafficked? Moreover, despite attaching lengthy text messages on various dates, he omits messages produced in the same thread about his violence. Redacted, 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 redacted. The defendant also rehashes his attacks on victim 1's motives, here we go, in bringing a civil suit because she wants to get paid, suggesting that the allegations against Diddy were merely attempts to obtain a financial windfall. Across multiple bail hearings and in the instant brief, he's made clear that his litigation strategy is to personally attack victim 1, stooping to any depth to attempt to undermine her credibility. Setting aside this questionable strategy, none of this undermines her motives because she's suing him to get paid, and these arguments have no bearing on the question of bail. The purpose of bail is to determine whether he's safe or not to entertain personal attacks on the victims. To the extent that he takes issue with her credibility, they can talk about that at trial. Now, he next says that the government is misleading the court as to the nature of communications with another victim, victim 2. The defendant's primary point of contention is saying she's not even a victim, in quibbling about how to label victim 2, an individual to whom he continues to pay a significant monthly sum. So Diddy is paying victim 2 money? The bank records show that the defendant's payments to victim 2 as recently as mid-September 24. They indicted him. He's paying her money. The government has requested and is awaiting updated financial documents through the present. This case is just trash. The defendant does not present any new information. The messages and recordings between Diddy and victim 2, which he says not even a victim, are clear on their face. He was leveraging financial benefits to cause victim 2 to adopt his narrative of their relationship, saying, I'm your sugar daddy, okay? Which is a thing that is like commonplace all over America these days, unfortunately. Whether or not the defendant agrees with the characterization of her as a victim, the communications highlighted by the government indicate that he used financial coercion to feed her a narrative, or him, or I don't know, with a defense theory, a theory at odds with another victim, with victim 2. Said, Diddy just threatened me about my sex tapes, where I'm heavily drugged and doing things he asked of me, describing victim 2's trauma. In light of their continuing financial support, it's not the government, but rather the defendant that is misleading the court. All right, let's go through the witnesses now. Diddy's attempts to spin his contacts with witnesses, including witnesses that were served with subpoenas, show he's obstructing, right? They say he's now contacting not the victim. So one was an ex who is suing him for money. The other is a person he's paying, who is now being gobbled up by the government as a victim. They say that Diddy claims the government misled the court and concealed the actual content of the communication between Diddy and a witness who got a subpoena. But phone records show that between the end of 2022 and 2024, witness 1 called Diddy by phone, and then Diddy would not respond. But that changed in June. Witness 1 got served with a grand jury subpoena, then Diddy started contacting them. They contacted each other over a voice over IP service. Even though witness 1 was represented by counsel, he and Diddy continued to talk. So they're saying, oh, it's interference, it's obstruction, witness tampering. He repeatedly contacted witness 1 despite his knowledge that he was represented by a lawyer and he got a subpoena, and so that undermines the defense saying he's not going to interfere with this case. They also talk about witness 2. They were bandmates, made music together, and from the timeline and the context, he reinitiated contact with this person as well. Reached out to witness 2 September 11th, sent her a copy of the lawsuit. They spoke for 6 minutes. Who's that? Spoke for 4 minutes. Evidently, the defendant and witness 2 discussed witness 2 drafting a statement, as immediately after the call, the defendant told witness 2 in a text message, blank, 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 then asked for the name of the attorney. From September 11th through September 15th, defendant and witness 2, multiple text messages and calls, 128 phone contacts in total, repeatedly asked witness 2 when she planned to post her statement. Oh, maybe it's like a J-Lo maybe or something? Witness 2 ultimately made a statement about the lawsuit. Then after the defendant was in custody, they recovered the following notes from the cell phone. So this was on Diddy's cell phone, redacted. From the timeline, we know he had multiple calls with witness 2. Witness 2 might be in this case, and so we know can't do that. He's not satisfied the elements required for reconsideration here, and so he's got plenty of accommodations where he's at right now. More than reasonable accommodation. He can meet with counsel 7 days a week. In fact, he has most days. He contacts them by phone. He uses written communication, so he can meet with his lawyers, and he's got plenty of time to prepare. The Bail Reform Act doesn't give him a basis here. The defendant does not point to any case law either, and he should not be released, and his complaints about the conditions come as a surprise to the government, given the contrary public statements made by the defendant himself when they're listening to his phone calls. He says it's great. So for the reasons discussed, Diddy has not met his burden. He's obstructing justice. He's contacting witnesses. We've also reviewed dozens of jail calls where he uses telephone accounts of at least 8 other inmates. So he's using other people's phone calls to avoid monitoring. They're monitoring him anyways. To obtain inmate access, he directs others to pay the inmates through payment processing apps and the commissary. Not allowed to do that. They say sharing of numbers is against policy, subject to discipline. He's also doing 3-way calls. Practice is not authorized by the Bureau of Prisons, and he's using non-authorized messaging services to reach out to people. Examples of these efforts are plentiful. He's doing this, he's doing this. He leaves no doubt that he's trying to taint the jury pool's perception of this criminal proceeding. So Diddy has a right to free speech. He has a right to communicate about this case. And we have a right to look at your charges and question them, because everybody deserves the presumption of innocence, even Diddy. After the court entered the order, he enlisted family members to execute a social media campaign around his birthday. So what? At the defendant's carefully curated direction, his children posted a video to their social media accounts. Said, "Happy birthday, Dad." So what? He's allowed to do that. These prosecutors. When you upset, your kids won't do that for you? The defendant from within the MDC then monitored the analytics. He's checking the numbers. He discussed with his family to show them how to boost those videos, man. He's like, yeah, now he's making content, man. So it's just funny. The defendant does not stop there. During other calls, he makes clear that he wants to anonymously publish information that he thinks is going to help his defense case. And redacted. Now, he can't publish certain things he's not allowed to publish from his case file or from other materials, but he's allowed to have his kids post stuff and have a conversation about what's happening in the case. That is our right. That's our only ability. When we're charged with crimes by our government, they have all the power, everything. They've got the money, the jails, the cops, hundreds of people, thousands on staff. Their whole job is to prosecute you. Judges get paid from the same people too. Our only freedom is our free speech. And you better believe you want your family out there shouting from the rooftops, proclaiming your innocence. Give me a break. So in a call involving the defendant and one of his adult sons, he says something and something else, and then something else, all redacted. And he's a danger to others too. He's a danger to the community. He's got a long history of abuse, which has basically been rigged in terms of his charges: kidnapping, arson, physical violence, throwing objects, kicking, choking, stomping, shoving. Yeah, all crimes, but you didn't charge him with those. You called it a RICO case. While far from the only example, the video of March 2016, which probably expired, so they can't charge him for that, but they just discovered it, so they call it a RICO case. He says that he had a complex relationship with victim one, but she was actually a victim, which she was a victim, if that was her, of domestic violence and all those things, and I'm not trying to minimize that at all. But was she a victim of human trafficking? That's the charge, and the charge has to match the crime. In sum, he cannot walk away from this record. His inability to explain his long history of violence, including March, it's all captured on film. Yeah, but it's old. And he continues to pose a flight risk. That is true. I think he'd probably get the hell out. He'd be gone, I think, very quickly. So that's really a crux of this. I think all this is a bunch of talk about marginal things. This is it. They know if you let him out, he's gone. The defendant's new proposed bail package is insufficient. While the conditions suggest that he'll have no access to telephones or the internet, still insufficient to show that he's not going to communicate through third parties. The only way we can show he's not going to communicate through third parties, keep him in jail. We have to restrict other people, but it's not going to prevent him from influencing the jury pool. Also, they say, well, we'll put 24/7 private security on him, but he can get others to do his bidding. There's no reason to say his private security won't. And so his updated proposal doesn't alleviate the risk, and so you cannot let him out. Signed by the Southern District of New York prosecutors, one of the most corrupt districts in the whole country, if not the most. Well, DC is the most. So number 2, out of New York in the Diddy case, and they're grasping